Hi, everybody, and welcome to a brand new week. As you know, every day on weekdays from 6 to 6:30 p.m., I'm going to be doing this live streaming series, and the goal is to discuss COVID-19, all the various aspects of it, whether it's public health, some new developments in therapeutics, or learning lessons from other states and abroad. I mean, all the topics. I answer your questions for a half an hour, and I also discuss current affairs that are relevant to Vermont. So let's begin. Earlier today, I posted on Facebook and I asked a question to Vermonters, which is how has this shutdown, shutting down the economy in Vermont, affected you and your family? So a few people wrote some comments, other people sent me emails, and I'll be very happy to discuss them. And so right off the bat, let's look at our first topic, which is understanding the economic toll of the pandemic shutdown. So Vermont's economy, as we all know, relies very heavily on the service sector, and as a result of social distancing guidelines and stay-at-home orders that were issued by the governor, we are seeing all businesses that are considered non-essential to be shut down. And as a result, the service sector, which is, grocery stores, retailers, restaurants, florists, coffee shops, all of these things we're seeing close down. Of course, the larger grocery stores, like let's say Shaw's and Price Chopper, of course, they're here. But smaller ones, like the ones that you see with the little deli shops. I've been driving around and I'm seeing they're not open anymore. And I mean, you could argue that they're essential, but they're also small businesses, and small businesses are not able to, I think, not able to do the payroll and continue because we're just not seeing enough customers. We're not seeing enough foot traffic. So that could be a reason why, general stores, for example, in small towns or villages are not open anymore. So this is sort of what we're looking at. And just today, Senator Corey Parent, he's a senator from Franklin County, he shared some information on Facebook, which a few people have been sharing, and I'd like to briefly discuss some of the numbers because I think they're very instructive. And it says that, well, the initial revenue forecasts for this fiscal year. So the legislature is looking at the budget and they're trying to figure out, how much money have we lost, because as I said, that the service sector especially is just shut down. It says, well, this is his words, we are in a dire situation. The general fund, which is basically, all the various monies that you get from sales tax, for example, that they're looking at a $200 million shortfall, which means $200 million less. The transportation fund is about $45 million less, and the education fund is about $145 million less. And so this is just preliminary, as it says, the initial revenue. Governor Phil Scott has said that we should expect the shutdown to go past April 15th. He has issued stay-at-home or shelter-in-place orders till April 15th. But as we know, President Trump has extended federal guidelines to April 30. So we should also expect something to that, or perhaps even further than April 30 in Vermont. What is going to be the impact of that on the economy? These are the initial numbers, and as you can see, we're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars, which the government expected to have in its budget, which is not going to be there. So how are we now going to address the situation? This is going to be a challenge, and I think it's going to be very, very important for us as Vermonters to be aware of what's going on and what decisions are being made. It seems to me it's very simple, that we just have to cut spending. There's a lot of waste, of course, but there's just no way There's no way that politics and business can go on as usual. That's completely, especially when we're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars in expected shortfall. Now, people on the left will obviously accuse me and others who say this, that, oh look, this is our prior agenda. We always want spending to be cut. We always want a lean government, and so now we're capitalizing on this pandemic to push through our political agenda. No, actually, I think that it's very important for states and governments to function within their means. I absolutely think that it is important for us not to be in millions or billions of dollars in debt. I think that is absolutely unacceptable. And we're going to see a few case models of states who were in a very fiscally strong position going in. These states are going to be able to bear the brunt of the losses caused by the pandemic much better than Vermont will. And we'll see these examples moving forward. I'm sure by May and June it'll be very clear once the numbers become a little more solidified. As I keep saying this over and over again, maybe a few months ago, 2 months ago, The Economist published an article saying that since the Great Recession of 2008, 49 states have made a full recovery. 49 states have all, overcome the fiscal disaster that was the Great Recession. All of them, all 49 states, 49, we have 50 states, except for one state. One state is still reeling from the disaster of the 2008 Great Recession, and that state is Vermont. So, and why? Why is that the case? Because we have a structurally weak economy. Anybody who lives in Vermont knows that to be a fact. When the state government is the largest employer, when hospitals, the UVM Health Network, and public school education are the next two greatest employers, and you know that this is such a large government, which is very huge in proportion to the small population that we have, about just 620,000 people. When that's the case, when entrepreneurship, creative enterprise, private enterprise, businesses are pretty much gone, they're shackled by mountains of red tape, draconian regulations, and an anti-business legislature and anti-business bureaucracy. When that is the case, as all of us here in Vermont know because we live here, then it's no surprise that we are going into this pandemic, into this unprecedented crisis with a serious disadvantage. So what is this going to mean? Well, we've lost jobs. So we know there's a record claims, unemployment claims or jobless claims have been filed. Today I saw a news report saying that the Vermont Department of Labor has said that the claims have leveled off. Okay, but the comments, whether they were on the article or I think it was Vermont Digger, so they tweeted that as well. And so the comments, even on Twitter, were actually very revealing. So many Vermonters said that they have been trying to file their unemployment claims, but not able to. Why? Because the phone lines are clogged. The online system doesn't work. The entire infrastructure is so overloaded that there's so many Vermonters who have unemployment claims that are not able to file. So I think that in a few weeks we'll see another jump, and this is obviously just going to continue, which is actually why I asked on Facebook, and I'm going to keep reaching out because I really want to hear from you, from the people of Vermont, your own stories of how this has hurt you and your families economically. I just heard this morning from one of my friends that he has lost his job. He said he drives a truck. They deliver fuel, and he said that half of the employees were laid off today because there's just no business. His wife also lost her job. She works in the service sector, and she lost it a few weeks ago. So we're seeing more and more of this happening. And so what happens when there's widespread unemployment? Now we know that the historic $2 trillion federal what is called a stimulus bill has been passed, and we're all waiting for the checks. Okay, but that's just a very short-term relief. what happens if we stay shut down for months? What happens if Vermont stays shut down until August? Is that money that we get, I don't know, 2,400 on average per family, $500 extra for every child? Is that going to be enough if you don't have a job? No, I don't think so. So and here's what was really troubling. So this is what he said. He said that his family is going to use the money received from the federal relief package to pay off Vermont state taxes, the property taxes. See, I found that very disheartening, because this money is not supposed to go from the federal government to the Vermont state government. It's not meant for that. It's meant for groceries, right? It's meant for utilities. It's meant for rent. It's meant for the family. And so here's where I'd like to talk about the fact that this historic $2 trillion package that's been passed and has been billed as a stimulus package is not going to really stimulate the economy. I was listening to an interview that was conducted by Peter Robinson for his program called Uncommon Knowledge at Stanford University with Kevin Warsh. And Kevin Warsh was an economic advisor. He was the head of the Federal Reserve, and so he knows economics. And he said that we should expect the money that goes to every family. We should expect Americans to either save that or use it to pay taxes, you see. So we're not going to see, on average, we're not going to see Americans use the money that we receive to spend it on the economy. It's going to be mostly used to be saved, because it's such an uncertain time. We don't know if any more money is going to come. We don't know when we're going to get another job, if we've lost our jobs. So on average, Kevin Warsh says that it's not going to stimulate the economy. It's going to be saved. Now, of course, this is one person's opinion, but Peter Robinson also interviewed another person, and he also seemed to say the same thing. I think there is a general understanding that, and you can also think about it yourself, when you want to hold on to that money. I know I want to save the money that I get, because I don't know about what's going to happen. There's so much uncertainty. So as far as stimulating the economy, that may not happen. So what happens then? What happens to our economy if it collapses? I'm not resorting to any scare tactics. I'm not trying to do fear mongering. I'm just trying to discuss the economic consequences of a prolonged shutdown, which more and more is becoming a taboo subject. And why is it becoming a taboo subject? It's because we are seeing many people, many politicians, many in the media draw a choice between public health and the economy. So we hear a lot of people saying, shutting down the economy and leading to trillions and trillions of dollars, let's say, of loss is fine if it saves even one life. And so this is a very problematic dichotomy, a distinction between the two. It's a false choice, because that's not how things work. I've said this before. Public health and the economy are two sides of the same coin. When there is unemployment and underemployment for a prolonged time, we know that there's an increase in depression, there's an increase in suicide rates, there is an increase in alcoholism, drug addiction. Like the opioid addiction actually happened when a lot of people lost their jobs, in Appalachia, when a lot of people lost their coal mining jobs and went on the dole. As they say, the opioid addiction, the OxyContin epidemic took hold there, because it preys on despair, right? The culture of despair and hopelessness, it preys on that. And so when that happens, isn't that also a public health crisis? So you can't, I think that this is a very false distinction to say, oh, you know what, let's compromise the economy if we can save lives. I don't think this is a right. I think this is very politicized, and I don't think it's a right way to look at the situation. And I'm very sorry that Congressman Peter Welch said that. I'm very sorry that he said, we are going to sacrifice the economy to save lives. It's not one or the other. We have to be very smart about how we approach this situation. And so I've been really thinking about it a lot, and I think that one aspect is, we defer. People talk about science. Yes, science matters, and we talk about deferring to experts. That's right. But an epidemiologist, who's an expert, knows everything about, let's say, COVID-19. He or she doesn't have the public mandate to make policy and to decide the direction of a state. And the same goes for an economist, whether it's Kevin Warsh or whoever. The reason why we have elected officials, that we have politicians, is because we have, as an electorate, the American people, as a public, we have chosen certain people to lead us. And so when we have Phil Scott as the governor of Vermont, or David Zuckerman as a lieutenant governor, these are people who have been elected statewide. Now, you may or may not like them or agree with their politics. One of them is a Republican, one of them is a progressive Democrat, but they are the leaders. And so whether it's Andrew Cuomo in New York, whether it's in Michigan, we're looking at Gavin Newsom in California, whoever it is, we're looking at our leaders, and it's up to our political leaders to surround themselves with experts, but then make a political decision to say, okay, how are we going to balance the economic consequences with the public health ones, and how are we going to set the course for Vermont? And I'm saying this because I want to encourage the people of Vermont to be mindful and be aware of our politicians. How many of them are just blindly deferring to, let's say, an economist or an epidemiologist? Or how many of them are weighing all the various considerations and are open to looking at the ramifications, the negative ramifications, let's say, that unemployment and underemployment has, as opposed to just focusing on the surge. There is an expected surge in Vermont. We're expecting, the peak hasn't come yet. Just focusing on, oh my God, we have to stop that somehow. How many people are open to both? And I think the mark of a good leader, a wise leader, is one who takes all aspects into consideration and doesn't demonize one over the other. I'm sorry to see that some people are demonizing those who are sounding the alarm on the economic consequences. That's going to be very, very detrimental to public health and to the social fabric of our society. So here's another thing, and I think that this is sort of another thing that's a little upsetting, but I'm coming to terms with it. And so I've heard the president say in his press conferences, I've heard a lot of people say that, we're going to have a bad quarter, the second quarter, as there are 4 quarters as they divide the fiscal year. We're going to have a very bad one because we've shut down the economy. All non-essential businesses have been shut. So it's going to be very bad, but then we'll have a quick bounce. That's not going to happen because it's not a tap, it's not a faucet that you just turn on and off. It's easier to shut down an economy than it is to just start it. It won't just switch back on. It will take a while. It'll take a while. There'll be some sputtering, some stumbling, and to really get back to where it was, it's going to take a while. And that will definitely have political consequences. I don't know what, but they are definitely going to be there. And that's why I said it's a little disheartening, because I suppose I'm naive. I don't know. I really thought that at this point, when we have a crisis, it should be just about dealing with a crisis, saving the economy, saving and helping American families as much as possible, and then overcoming it. But I've talked about the sensationalization by the media, and I'm seeing an ongoing politicization of this particular issue, and that's very disheartening. Okay, so right. So then there's another aspect to it, which is what happens, I asked the question, how are people being affected by this? And one of them is the rise of homeschooling. There were a few families who were already homeschooling, so that just continues. But there are a lot more families now that are being well, in a way, forced to educate their kids at home. And that's not an easy task, obviously, because we're not teachers. I don't have any children yet, but my sibling has three children, and the oldest is 7. And, her school, for example, has distance learning, virtual learning on the computer, but it's not the same thing. She was learning a lot. Now, some might say, oh, she's only 7. That's true. She's not 17. This is not junior year, but still, as a young girl, a young child, she was learning a lot, and it's different, when it's a virtual as opposed to peer-to-peer learning, as opposed to in-person instruction. However, this is a situation that we have. I was advised about a site called EdWatch Vermont, ED Watch Vermont, and there's a Facebook page where I'm told that there are a lot of resources for parents who are homeschooling their children. A lot of things that they can do, some prompts, different exercises, and I'm very curious about it. As I said, I don't have children myself, but if you are a parent and you are homeschooling your child for the first time, what are some resources that you are using? Is EdWatch Vermont one of them? And I would love to hear more about it in the comment section. Please feel free to leave a comment, or you could email us at info@Hansen, HANSEN, for Vermont, spelled out.com. I'd love to do a few more of these Facebook live streaming series on homeschooling, and I'd like to share resources with Vermont parents. And so for this, I'm asking for your expertise, your experience on it. This is sort of like our collective way of sharing resources, and I would love to use the campaign Facebook page as a way of sharing these important resources with Vermont parents. Okay, our next question is, or our next comment is, cooking. So there are a couple of families that are talking about how can we cook, that they have to cook more, and how can we cook in in ways that are nutritious and delicious. But because you know what, I think a lot of families are supporting takeout, but this Vermonter didn't want to do any more pizza takeout, and she wanted to just cook healthy. So I usually Google, quick, easy, healthy recipes. Rachel Ray is a person that I've been following for years. She has great recipes that are easy to follow. So I would recommend her personally. But again, I'm putting it out there and saying, and again, I just cook for myself and my husband. That's different from cooking for children. And so I'm, putting it out there and saying, if you have any resources that you use for fun ways to cook delicious and nutritious meals for your family, especially for children, please leave your resources in the comments, and I'll be happy to do a whole show on cooking, actually, baking even, and we can share some recipes and resources. Okay, so and then right, okay, yes. Now for the final point, we're talking about I heard from a dairy farmer. There was a report about and actually there was a very disturbing video as well with it. That Vermont Digger did something about it. A few other Vermont media outlets have also written about it, and that is the overproduction of milk, dairy milk, and how it has to be dumped. So the video showed trucks full of milk, like perfectly natural, normal milk. It wasn't spoiled, and they opened the faucet and it was just getting dumped. And I was so shocked. So I thought, no, don't do that. There's so many people who need milk. I mean, sometimes I've heard of stories where people go to the supermarket and there isn't any milk, or there's a limit on how much milk that they can buy because they're trying to serve everybody and not have one person hoard all the milk. But at the same time, we're seeing the dumping of milk. I don't understand this divide between, the supply and demand. However, I was told that this is something that happens even, in non-COVID-19 times, that the overproduction and then dumping of milk happens all the time. So, which has, of course, different connotations. It's a completely different topic, but for some reason, like as I said, it's being politicized as related to COVID-19. So Peter Briggs is one of my really close friends, and he's a dairy farmer. He owns Briggs Farms up in Addison County. So I've reached out to him, and he's going to discuss this tomorrow with us. And he's going to explain what happens normally and how it's changed or not changed as a result of COVID-19. So look out for that tomorrow. And then finally, there is some thoughts about some discussion on Twitter. Now, Twitter is an interesting place because it's really an echo chamber, and if you look at Vermont, it's really an echo chamber of the very far left. And so, engaging with that, I don't really find find anything meaningful, in terms of a return on investing your time and energy in that, but it is instructive in some ways. And so there's a discussion going on about how COVID-19 is going to hit rural areas of Vermont really hard. So the Northeast Kingdom, for example, parts of southern Vermont. I find that a little, I don't know. I find that a little strange because the most hard-hit areas are the Burlington metropolitan area. No, not only because there were outbreaks in senior living homes, assisted living facilities. Not only because of that, but because it's densely populated, and that's how it spreads. The whole point of the virus, SARS-CoV-2, is that it spreads person to person. That's why we have stand at least 6 feet apart, social distancing, stay at home. So if anything, it would be an advantage in some way, or it would, slow the contagion in areas where people was very sparsely populated, very few people living very far apart. But the political twist was that, according to this discussion that's going on in our Vermont political sphere, is that in rural areas, people are stubborn, and they aren't going to follow the social distancing guidelines. I was like, okay, so that's the twist. It's like, okay, well, these rural rednecks or rubes, whatever you want to call it, they're not going to listen. They're not going to follow science. They're going to, go on about their normal day, and they're going to spread the virus. And I found that repulsive, absolutely repugnant. And as I said, there's really no point in engaging with that, but it's instructive to see. It's really instructive to see this public discourse, because it reveals the biases, the very real biases that some media persons and cultural influencers have, and then how does that affect news coverage, for example, of cases, COVID cases in the Northeast Kingdom. I'll tell you, as far as facts are concerned, we've had very few cases up in the Northeast Kingdom and in southern Vermont. We've had the vast majority of cases concentrated in Chittenden County, Addison County, and then going into Rutland County. So it's really that area in the northwest where it's maximum concentrated, and that's an urban part, the only urban part of Vermont. So ideology and facts don't match in this case. But I wanted to share that with you because I've noticed that there are very few people who are right of center who are on Twitter and who are, it's called hashtag VTPoli, P-O-L-I. So hashtag VTPolitics. Very few people are on that. And so, whereas on Facebook, there's a larger audience. And so I just wanted to share that very strange, but as I said, instructive discourse that's happening in that particular public sphere with you. Okay, I think that's it. It's 6:30, and that's it for today. As I said, I'll have a little more on the dairy tomorrow. I, if you watched on Friday, you'd know that I was supposed to talk about One Care Vermont. I need a little more time with that. So, because it's a little complicated and I don't want to bore you, but I'll get to that. I'll also have more from the dairy farmers and how this shutdown is affecting dairy production and how much truth is there with, about the dumping in general versus now. And finally, just one request with all of you. If you find these daily Facebook live streaming series instructive, if you find them informative, and it's something that you enjoy watching, please help me spread the word. You can start by inviting all your friends on Facebook to like and follow our campaign page, Hansen for Vermont. Another thing that you could do is reach out to your local county Facebook page, so Rutland County, Windsor County, Orleans. We have in Vermont very active county pages, whether it's a page or a group. You can reach out to them and ask them to share links to these videos and links to our Facebook page. We have about 400 people on our campaign page. As you know, this is the only way that I can reach out to people, and I really want to be of service. I really want to be able to share information which people find important, along with well-researched and well-reasoned analysis. And I would really appreciate your help in getting the word out. So thank you very much, and I'll see you again tomorrow at 6 p.m.